loves TV. Yes, I made a theme song so that I can talk about all my favorite shows. Oh yeah! And this is just your disclaimer that this is not me talking about any of the actors themselves, but more so their characters. Please do not attack me in the comments. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, even those who disagree with me. But let's keep it friendly. Alright, let's get started with the show. I know this is the video y'all have been waiting on. Welcome back to the Hater Cafe. I'm your host, Kiera the Goddess. This is a video that's been a long time coming. I hope y'all can feel the love because normally I skip right through all the Christopher scenes and I watch them purposely just for you. I've gotten endless comments asking me to talk about Christopher, and rightfully so. Christopher Hayden is one of the worst characters to appear on Gilmore Girls. And while I see a bunch of comments where people agree with me about that, there is a large portion of people that do not understand why he's most hated. When you have a show that is so heavily focused on the bond between a single mom and her daughter, like, of course people are going to wonder, okay, so what happened with the dad? Why is she a single mom? Christopher is one of those characters that is just so despised by the fandom, like you have no choice but to make this into a series. So this will be part 1 on breaking down why everybody hates Christopher Hayden. In this part of the series, we're going to be focusing on his very first episode, and we're going to go all the way up to episode 9 of season 5. Christopher's first appearance is in episode 14 of season 1. He shows up right at the end, getting off of his motorcycle. His very first line makes you turn your head. It makes you wonder, what type of person is this? And then quickly in the next episode, with the dialogue between him and Lorelai, you learn why you're so eager for him to leave, and why you're happy to see him go at the end of the next episode. This would bring me to my first segment, which is going to be called Christopher versus himself. It's mentioned early on that Christopher is basically a vagabond. We learn quickly that while he does come from money, he's financially illiterate. He seems to make poor financial decisions despite desperately wanting to get his own. It seems likely that he's not living off his parents based off of the way he's dressing and the fact that he couldn't just automatically afford to get Rory the book that she wanted. And when he can't get the book, this is automatically shameful because everyone pretty much knows that he has a problem with money. So he lies. He doesn't tell Lorelai that he can't afford the book, and he doesn't tell her that his business is starting to go to crap. I feel like Christopher is always just in some kind of battle with himself. Like his biggest enemy is himself. It's his inconsistency, it's his poor communication, it's stuff like that that just keeps him from being able to be with Rory and Lorelai. And speaking of, let's get into it. This next segment is called Christopher and Rory. This is the part where I really start getting pissed off, to be honest with you, because like his relationship with Rory is so sucky and his focus is never where it's supposed to be. In Christopher's first episode, when Rory is trying to set up that little blanket pad that she was trying to set up for him, Lorelai says to Rory that it's the first time that he's ever come to Stars Hollow. What? It has been said multiple times that they have lived there since Rory was a baby. So what do you mean that Rory is now, 15, 16 at this point? And this is the first time that you have come to Stars Hollow? So my question is, when and how has Rory seen him? Only at Richard and Emily's? He even says in this episode that he has not been a part of her life like he was supposed to be. Lorelai reminds Christopher that she never tried to keep her from him, and he agrees. The other side of this is that it's really unclear how much involvement he actually was having in her life. Because on one hand, they're telling us that Christopher has been totally absent in her life, and then on the other, they're telling us that Christopher let his girlfriend meet Rory at Easter. And then in the kitchen, Lorelai says that she hasn't seen Christopher since last Christmas. But at this point, they're wearing long sleeves and jackets. So I'm like, has it almost been another year? I don't know. That just tells me off rip that Easter was probably a while ago. But even if we could get it cleared up about how much he's seeing her and not seeing her, his relationship dynamic with her has no chemistry. It's very apparent off the bat that he doesn't know much about Rory or her personality. And then Lorelai has to explain the Christopher lore to Suki in the kitchen. So again, I say, how much has he been involved? What is the timeline of this? I'm gonna chalk it up to he only sees her around the holidays because that's literally the best conclusion I can come up with at this point. I am sick. We're gonna keep pushing. Season 2, episode 6, Rory feels nervous asking her dad to show up because she feels like he's not gonna show up, which is utterly tragic and extremely telling. Then on top of that, Lorelai spends a lot of time just trying to convince Christopher to come, which to me just says that in the past she probably has tried to get him to show up for things and he did it. Then that's confirmed because Lorelai literally says it. She says that he's made promises to Rory before and stood her up. In season 3, episode 2, it's Friday night dinner and Christopher shows up in the middle of the dinner. He's badgering Lorelai about how she's not returning his calls. About this thing about how the part that hurts the most is that you're keeping Roy from me. And it's like, yo, you're in the wrong. Like, you think that you can just do all this stuff and nobody's gonna feel any type of feelings about it? And then when he walks in, he doesn't even acknowledge Rory. So what are you talking about? And then it kind of forces Rory to come out of the room and say something to him because he's blaming Lorelai for something that she didn't even do. This scene for me feels like that shift that often happens when a parent is less active and present in a child's life, where it starts off where the child constantly seeks their attention and wants to be involved, and kind of there's this mystery of like, okay, well, why weren't you around or whatever? And it's like almost like a switch kind of flips at some point that the child starts feeling like they're not their parent. They're almost like just a person that they know that is extremely flawed. Christopher has put himself in a very, very harsh position at this point because he is choosing to be a part of this new kid's life. And meanwhile, Rory is just kind of like, wow, you know, like, why was I not worth you? And I spoke about this on my YouTube channel, but you know, like I think she kind of feels like, why was I not worth you staying for? Why are you choosing to be a father to this new child, but you still have me on the side and I still need a dad? Like, it's not like she was fully grown at that point or that she was in her 30s even. Like, she's still very young and she still needs her father, and he's like choosing someone else over her. And I don't think she's taking it personally, like she's like looking to have some kind of animosity towards Gigi. I think that it's more about just the fact that he hasn't been there and she's been deprived and she's just tired of it. And despite how painful it is, at the end of this scene, Lorelai goes out there and she tries to give him some hope that they will reconcile and their relationship will heal from this, and all he needs to do is give her time, despite the fact that he was just barking at Lorelai like not even that long ago. It's extremely evident the change in their dynamic when later on in season 5, episode 6, Rory goes to Christopher's apartment and tells him like, listen, I don't want you contacting mom. The entire time that Rory's talking to Christopher, it's almost like she's talking to a child. She's like, basically, I know that it's out of your control. You can't help but screw up everything, but leave my mama alone. Like, I think she cares about him still because that's her dad. But that, again, that doe-eyed innocence, it is gone. She's come to this understanding that he's irresponsible and immature and impulsive, and she just feels like he represents chaos in her life and she doesn't want any part of that. But Christopher is not hated just because of his absence in Rory's life. He is also hated for how much presence he has in Lorelai's life. This is a segment I would happily like to call Christopher and Lorelai. Strike one. He's barely seen his kid in 16 years, but the first time he sees Lorelai, what does he try to do? He tries to marry her. He also frequently mentions how much contact he has with Lorelai's parents, and I kind of feel like Emily was somehow behind that proposal. And then as soon as it looks like he's getting his life together, he announces that not only does he have a girlfriend, they're living together. Yeah. In season 2, episode 14, Lorelai brings up the fact that he never mentioned Sherry was coming with him when he was in town visiting. And he talks about how, oh, like, you never let me know, like, you never let me meet Max or anything. Like, what the heck does that have to do with the other? I'll wait. First of all, think about how this looks. He brought some stranger to her house without even checking with her to make sure it was okay. How is that the same thing as, you never introduced me to your ex-boyfriend? Like, what does that have to do with anything? Just because he was in the mood for Lorelai and Rory to meet his girlfriend doesn't mean that they were. He gave them no preparation. And back to the whole, you never introduced me to Max thing. Like, how was she supposed to keep track of when you want to be involved in their lives and when you don't? After 16 years of inactivity, he decides he wants to clock in and be a father. Like, Lorelai's been doing this whole thing by herself the whole time. So, of course, it's not just automatically in her brain to include you in everything because you haven't been a part of their lives so far. Like, yes, in a perfect world, it'd be great if everybody got to meet, but he clearly has a history of popping in and out. So I don't really see how he thinks he can nail her to the cross on that. And then his smug little smile as he's bringing it up, that's the part that really bugged me. Episode 14 of season 2 really shows us just how bonded Christopher and Lorelai actually are. He's able to guess things that happened even when he wasn't there because he knows Lorelai so well. But something else that also gives him a red flag in my book, and it's not really his fault, it's more like everybody else does it. They blame Lorelai so much for her part in what happened with her getting pregnant so young, and they talk about how much she, ruined his life and all this other mess. And I just feel like if he wasn't able to keep a job, even when Lorelai wasn't around, and he
didn't have Rory basically most of the time. He didn't have her. He didn't come see her except maybe around holidays. Like, that's the gist of what we're getting here. I don't understand how a child stopped him from achieving anything in life. I don't get why the responsibility automatically falls on Lorelai, who, even though she had a child with her and was raising a child by herself, she still was able to accomplish things in life. Even if it wasn't what they necessarily wanted for her, she did find a way to provide for herself and make it on her own. But there's all this conversation about how, having Rory, really screwed up his life. How did it screw up his life if he wasn't taking care of her? I don't understand that. Like, it's really almost as if he didn't even have a child. Like, he could have walked around as though he didn't even have one, because he didn't live in the same household as her. He wasn't babysitting her frequently. He wasn't coming to see her frequently, nothing. So again, how did having a child impact Christopher's life in any way? That's like somebody in your family getting a hamster and you going around complaining like, you getting this hamster really ruined my life. And it's like, you only see the hamster, again, like you only see this thing around the holidays. Maybe this is a terrible analogy, but like you only see this thing around the holidays and you're complaining that it's ruined your life, something that you're not even present for. Okay, I'm done. In episode 22 of season 2, Christopher starts coming around more and Lorelai's starting to notice. He's able to just drop everything and be there for them. He announces that him and Sherry are not working out. Christopher and Lorelai sleep together despite it not officially being over between him and Sherry. They start making plans for the future, and then he finds out that Sherry is pregnant. And anybody who talks to me for more than 5 seconds knows that I love Lorelai down. But one thing that irritated me about this situation is the part where I think she tells him something like, you're gonna be a dad or something like that. Like, he's already a dad. Like, can we stop? Can we please stop with the games? It's stupid. It's stupid. Just because Lorelai did not marry him at 16 years old, which is still insane to me, but just because she didn't want to marry him does not mean that he got to just dip on his responsibilities. Like, that's ridiculous. Christopher is already on strike 98 at this point with me, but this was when, like, on my rewatches, I always chose to just skip his scenes. Like, anything I knew about him at that point was against my will. In season 3, episode 13, we see a young Christopher and Lorelai. He has this plan to hold off on going to college and go backpacking through Europe. And this is where I jump back to my point about how Lorelai is often blamed for a lot of stuff that had to do with Christopher, and it really wasn't her fault. Like, for one, when they walk in, he pours the drink. He's the one that suggests that they drink. He's the one that wants to go backpacking through Europe. He's the one that suggests to just leave and leave a letter, which is exactly what she does at the end of the episode. Like, when they show after she's had Rory and everything, like, that was I feel like she kind of pulled from that idea that he already planted in her head that it was acceptable to just leave a letter and dip. Christopher is given this vibe like, screw the system. I'm going to do what I want to do and I'm going to live my life as some kind of nomad and, whatever. And it's like, as soon as Lorelai is pregnant and they start deciding everything for his life, then all that just goes out the window. And I think it's important to note that there's such a severe contrast here between Lorelai going to labor pretty much by herself and then Sherry has Christopher like by his side. It's just another reminder of how much Lorelai has endured alone. And that Lorelai never got the support she needed from Christopher. He doesn't even show up, I think, until they're in the nursery. In episode 6 of season 5, Christopher calls Lorelai in a panic because he's alone with Gigi and he doesn't know how to take care of her. Hear me when I say this. He doesn't know how to take care of his child again. Again. I thought Gigi was supposed to be the do-over. I thought we were supposed to get it right this time. I thought this time was supposed to be hands-on father, dedicated, blah blah blah. And you telling me you couldn't even figure out how to keep the girl from getting out of her crib? And Lorelai comes in there 2 seconds, and she figures out how to do it. It's just irritating. I understand why people have so much animosity towards him, because Lorelai had to figure it out on her own. She did not have some magical fairy to come on and show up and help her out and give her all the answers to parenthood. She had to do it. She had to fail and she had to try again. She had to fail and she had to try again. She had to do it all on her own. And yes, some of that she chose to do on her own because she didn't want her parents involved for a good reason. Like, let's not even, check out my series on Emily Gilmore manipulation to see how I feel about that. But I'm saying that she had to do the majority of the work as a parent on her own. She did not have somebody to come behind her and really tell her whether she was doing everything right or wrong. I don't understand for the life of me why people act like women were just born with this innate ability to raise children and have all the magical answers to child raising. Women do not come out automatically just knowing everything there is to know about being a parent. And maybe this is a controversial take, I don't believe that men are just so confused and just don't know what to do, and women are just naturally suited for child raising. I don't believe in that. I believe a main reason why men struggle so hard when it comes to raising their children and being the hands-on dad that most women dream of is because from a young age, men are not taught to be fathers. We are taught from a very young age to be mothers with baby dolls, and all of our toys kind of center around like being nurturing. And it's not just the toys, it's even in media. The movies they watch, the TV shows they watch, all enforce this idea that men are naturally incompetent, that men naturally cannot be good fathers or present fathers in their household. Meanwhile, women are taught to be nurturing from a young age, from like the toys that we play with. A lot of it is very nurturing, and a lot of the media we watch just teaches us that it's not acceptable to be a bad mom. It's not acceptable to be inadequate as a parent in any way. Like, you cannot fail as a mom. That idea is constantly pushed on young ladies. I saw a really good post that was clearly pointing out how in media, like television shows and whatnot, it's praised. It's a laughable thing for a man to not be present with his children when he forgets the anniversary, when he doesn't know the kid's birthday, when he's just not mentally there with his kids. It's not looked at as shameful. It's almost like a joke. There are very few examples in media and sometimes even in reality that actually depict what it looks like to have a present father in the household. In my opinion, this is why you have fathers like Phil Dunphy from Modern Family who are often praised and like they're in the Hall of Fame of fatherhood, because Phil Dunphy, while he doesn't know everything, what you have to give Phil is that he always tries to be the best possible parent he can be for his kids. He's emotionally supportive. He accepts them for who they are. He gives them some kind of balance. It's far too normalized for men to not have basic skills, even as far as it's like there are some men walking around that don't know how to cook for themselves because it was never either taught to them or it was never enforced that this is something you need to learn to survive. It is Christopher's responsibility to be actively present in Rory's life, yes, but I think as a society, and I think it's starting to happen, I've definitely seen it, but it needs to be more of a requirement. It needs to be normalized for young boys to be self-sufficient. Christopher reveals to Lorelai that Sherry got a job offer in Paris and she's decided basically to not be a parent if it ain't the consequences of his actions. I feel like this is Christopher's karma at this point, because this is the exact same thing that he did to Lorelai, except he didn't have a job. And a big kicker here, they were teenagers and he left her by herself. I think they want to show how this would look if a woman did exactly what Christopher did, and they did it beautifully. But I feel like in the fandom, Sherry's probably going to get a lot more backlash, not only because she abandoned Gigi and Christopher. I also feel like it's because, there's not enough depth to her character. We don't really know as much about her. So it's so easy to just paint her as the villain, and not saying that she was right for doing it, because she was dead wrong. But I'm saying that I think that just because it's a woman doing it, I definitely see that there is way more backlash for Sherry than there is for Christopher. In episode 9 of season 5, Christopher calls Lorelai, and that's when they have that lunch that Rory was so against. And at the end of the episode, Christopher leaves a voicemail for Lorelai saying that he wants to talk things further out, but it looks like she's not going to talk to him at this point. So far throughout this whole thing, Christopher has only had two kind of good moments. 2 moments so far that have happened that probably make people feel like, no, he really does care. He's really a good guy. Is when he showed up for Rory after she had the car accident, and the time where he came back to visit and he actually did show up with the book that Rory wanted the entire time. It's been so long since I've done a Why Everybody Hates video, and I told you guys I would not wrap up this series without at least doing Christopher and Logan, because they really deserve it. They're among many who deserve it, but I feel like they irk my nerves probably the most. Unfortunately, Christopher is in a lot of episodes, so it would take me years to get through this. So I hope you guys are enjoying part 1, and I would love to see you guys in the next one.